We now want to turn our attention to interest. Now, this is very important in the context of finance, as you would expect. But in this video, I want to contrast two types of interest. So let's get started. The first one is simple rate of interest, and the second one is compound rate, which we'll see later. It's important to have a clear understanding of the distinction between the two of these, and you'll see how this works out as I go through it. Take an example. Let's say I put £400 in the bank for a year at 2%. So I put £400 in the bank. I call the £400 my principal. So I put my principal of £400 into the bank for a year at 2%. Now, we'll assume here we're using a simple rate of interest. You'll see what this means as we work through it. Well, it's called a simple rate of interest. Now, at the end of the year, I'll get £8 interest. I'll get 2%, so I'll get £2 on every 100. 2%. 2 on every 100. I'll put in 400, so 4 times 2 is 8. I'll get £8 interest. At the end of the year, I'll get back £408. I'll get 2% return. Now, the formula for working this out is this one. I'll put the cursor on the screen. Not really a cursor, but it'll do. So we got the amount here and the principal, 1 plus R. R is the rate of interest. So the rate of interest is 2%, 0.02. So it's 1 plus 0.02. 1 plus the 2%. The principal is 400. So therefore, evaluating inside the brackets, I got 1.02 times 400. Multiply that out, and you find it's 408. So that's what I get back after the year. Now let's say I put £400 in the bank for 3 years at 5%. How much will I get back after 3 years? Well, here's our formula. We have our principal, the amount, the rate of interest, and so on, and the time. So I'll put £400 in. That's my principal. I get 5%. That's 0.05, and I get it for 3 years. So 3 times that is 0.15. Remove the bracket, and I get 1 plus 0.15. Multiply all of that by 400, and I get 460. So if I have £400 and I get 5% in the bank, and I leave it there for 3 years, I'll get 460 back. And that's simple rate of interest. That's how you work it out. Now let's introduce this idea of compound rate of interest, and let's start by looking at the simple rate of interest. So if I put £100 in the bank for a year at 3%, at the end of the year I will get £103. At the end of the second year, I will get my deposit of £100 plus the first year's interest of £3 plus the interest on £100. So at the end of the year, I will get a simple rate of interest. The compound is more difficult, but much more realistic. If I put £100 in the bank for a year at 3%, at the end of the year I'll get £103. At the end of the second year, I'll get my £100 back, the one I put in up here, plus the interest from the first year, which is £3, there, plus the interest on £103. Now please note, it's not the interest on the principal anymore. This is our principal. It's now the principal plus the interest I got in the first year. So in the second year, I get the interest on this one. And that's different. This one does not take this into account. We don't get the interest on the interest here. We do in the compound rate. So working this one out, we've got the principal, which is 100. It's 3% for 2 years. So multiply that. It's and add it to the 1, we get 1.06. Multiply it by 100, we get 6. We get £6 interest. We get an amount at the end of 106. So we get 3% on the first year, so it gives us 103, and we get 3% on the second, which is another 3, and add the two together, we get 106. This one, we put 100 into the bank and we get 3%, so we get 103. But in the second year, we don't get the interest on 100, we get the interest on 103. And that's different. So now we're getting interest on interest. Our £100 has grown to £103 in the first year. Now we get interest on that. And that's what makes it different. So if we look down here, this is how we calculate our simple rate of interest. And for our compound rate, we'll get the first year, which is the same as over here, same as a simple. So we start the same, and at the end of the first year we get 103. We get a 3% return. However, at the end of the second year we get the interest back, we get our principal back, plus we get the £3 which we get on the first year, this one here, but now we get interest on that as well, which gives us, in this case, 0.09. It's not a lot, but it's different. The figures are different. This one's 106, this one's 106.09. It's compounding. Now the compound rate of interest. If I put £100 in the bank at say 5%, at the end of the year I'll get £105. If I leave it in the bank for a further year, I will now get interest on my £100 plus the first year's interest of £5. At the end of the second year I will get my deposit of £100 plus my first year's interest of £5 plus the interest on the £5, because I've left it for 2 years. So I could have taken, if I'd taken out the money or the £5, I would get a different figure, but I've left the £5 in, so it's compounded now for 2 years. In other words, I get the interest at the end of the first year of £5, and in the second year I get the interest on the interest plus the interest on the principal. So I get we get the interest on the £105. So deposit £100, year 1 grows into 105. Year 2 I take the 105 here and leave it in the bank. So now the amount has gone up to 105, and I get interest on that, same interest, 5%. Working it out, if you go through each step here, you get to 110.5. So it's a different figure to the simple interest one. Now let's say I buy a government bond that will mature in 90 days. So I buy a bond, after 90 days I get my money back and I get a rate of interest. At the time I will receive, let's say, £1,500. If I buy the bill for £1,250, what's the rate of interest I've received? There's our formula, the one we've been using. The amount is equal to the principal times 1 plus the rate of interest times the time period. So insert it in. It's 1,500. We know what the amount is. 1,500. That's what we get back. That's the amount I put in, 1,250. That's the principal. The times 1 plus R times 0.25. So 90 days, it's approximately 0.25. I don't know what R is, that's what I'm trying to work out. So it's that rate of interest times this one. Well, 90 days is approximately a quarter of a year. 4 nines 36, so 360, 5 days out, but just near enough that. So now multiply it out and evaluate. First of all, evaluate inside the bracket. So when we do that, we get this sum here, and when we take that across is equal to 250, this one here, and taking this down, it's 0.8%. That's what I get on the bond. So what we've got here is a calculation for showing how to work out a rate of interest. Some of you may have been confused where this 312.5 comes from. That's simply R multiplied by 0.25 multiplied by 1250. So 1250 into 1 goes in 1250, 1250 into this sum here goes in 312.5 R. So now we take this away from here, and that gives us 250. So we've got 312.5 R equals that. Divide by 312 R, and we get 8%. If my credit card company charges me 12.2 interest annual on 15.2, I beg your pardon, 15.2 interest annual on overdrawn accounts. Now, if I owe 1,057 on my card and it is 3 months overdue, what interest will I pay? So here we start with 3 months. So 3 months is approximately 0.25, as I said before. 3 months is about a quarter of the year. Well, depends on how we won't measure it in days, but we'll just say, yeah, 3 months, just 12 months in the year, so divide by 3, so it's 0.25. Let's leave it at that and leave the days, the complication of the days alone. Now, I owe 1,057, so that's my principal. I've got 1. The rate of interest here is this one here, 15.2%. So we'll put that in there, and we've got the time period, so it's a quarter of a year. Now multiply all of this out, we'll get this, and multiply this, we'll get that, and that's what I owe on my card. So the interest payable is £19.41. And this has been a brief run over the topics that we meet when we deal with the rate of interest. There will be much more material available on our site to cover this. It is an important topic, and it'll be dealt with more fully in the financial materials that we present, the videos that we present there, and indeed it's touched upon in accountancy as well, where we'll look at that there. So that's all we're going to deal with, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.